Hello and welcome to this University of Leicester PG Spotlight session on heritage and culture. My name is Alicia. I'm the UK Postgraduate Recruitment Officer here at the University. I'm also going to be the host for today's session, and my colleague Sam is on hand in the chat function to organise and arrange any questions that you might have. So please take a moment to familiarise yourself with the Teams layout. The chat function is located in the top right part of your screen, sort of on the banner near the top. Please feel free to click on that and say hello, let us know where you're joining from, maybe a bit about what you're looking for from today's session, but also feel free to pop any questions in there as well, and we'll try and get to them towards the end. I'm joined by staff today from Archaeology and Ancient History, History, Museum Studies and Media and Communications. So we are hopefully going to be exploring a bit about what Master's Studies like at Leicester and perhaps some careers beyond that as well. Just so you know, these sessions are being recorded. You will be able to watch them back online shortly after the session. So please keep an eye on your emails for those links so you can catch up with any that you perhaps have missed or rewatch the session if you'd like to later. So just to get started, I'm going to hand over to our panel. And if that would be great, you could introduce yourselves with your name, a bit about your role, and maybe something interesting about your work or area of research. So Isabel, am I okay to start with you?
Sure, yeah, my name is Isabel Wyatt-Legg. I'm based in the School of Museum Studies, and I teach within our MA program in Art, Museum and Gallery Studies. And my background is in art history, so I work as a research and curator in that area and have a specialist focus on contemporary art in Brazil, contemporary institutions in Brazil and their histories.
That's great. Thank you, Isabel. James is going to hand over to you next.
Hello, I'm James Campbell. I work in the School of History, Politics and International Relations. I'm the Director of Postgraduate Teaching Programmes for the history side of our school. And I work on American history, mainly in histories of crime and punishment. And some of my teaching on the MA programmes is related to that.
That's brilliant. Thank you. And then, Jan, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you. My name's Jan Hayward, and I'm in the School of Archaeology and Ancient History. I'm a Greek historian, and I work particularly on history writing, especially the so-called first historian Herodotus of Halicarnassus from the 5th century BCE. And just an interesting thing to note as well, I'm calling from Dublin. I'm an external examiner here, and I'm using one of the facilities that the department have very kindly provided me. So greetings to you all from the island of Ireland.
That's amazing. That's really great to hear. Thank you so much. And then Jenny, I'm going to hand over to you. It's lovely to see you.
Hi, sorry I'm a bit late joining. I'm assuming that this is just a quick introduction of who we are and what we do and that kind of thing. So my name's Jenny Bosworth. I work at the School of Education, and my role there is that I'm the Director of Teacher Education. So I look after the PGCE courses, which train teachers for both primary and secondary. I also work with colleagues who do MAs in international education and those elements, so happy to answer any questions, mostly about teacher training and that sort of postgraduate study today. And if there are questions that people have that I haven't got the answers to, then I can happily, give contact details for people if needed.
That's lovely. Thank you so much. Thank you all for your introduction. So I guess what we just wanted to maybe touch on briefly as kind of our first sort of question is the sort of areas and topics that students perhaps may have recently studied in their masters. I know obviously, Jenny, your courses maybe feature slightly differently. So if you wanted to kind of answer the question a different way, that's absolutely fine. But did anyone kind of want to touch on any projects that may have occurred sort of in the past couple of years or so?
I can go first if
absolutely as well. Yeah, that'd
keep
be
the
great.
flow. Well, as people in the room might imagine, the research project happens towards the end of the programme, so they're really tailored by what students are interested in and kind of in combination with what they're taught through the master's programme. So one of the most memorable ones I supervised recently was about how live forms such as dance and performance are collected within museums and how they're displayed within museums. So that was a particularly interesting one that stayed with me. And we have a really broad range of subjects that students will research, that that kind of link to the course and to staff expertise. So just to throw out a few examples from this year, they're doing their research projects now. One looking at how exhibitions of fashion address the issue of cultural appropriation. Another looking for informed object handling session, how those can be helpful for specific communities. Rapid response collecting policies as a way of engaging the public in the process of collecting, and how exhibitions address histories that are dark or uncomfortable. So that gives you something of an idea of the kind of range of topics that people might choose to pursue.
That's great.
Towards the end
Thank you
of
so much for
master's
sharing.
program.
That's
No
brilliant.
problem.
Thank you, Isabel. I think I can see a few sort of people in the chat as well talking about maybe courses, elements that they'd like to study in museum studies. So you might want to take a look at the chat for that. Jan, did you want to maybe pick up on a couple of sort of topics or research areas?
Absolutely, and very much just to second what Isabella said, that the research project will come towards the end of the master's degree programme after you've completed the taught element. And of course, the projects are very much tailored to the particular interests that people want to explore. And as you can imagine, in a department like ours, the topics are hugely diverse, looking at kind of indigenous cultures through kind of post-colonial lens from one end of things, let's say from a kind of archaeological project, let's say, to the other end. We had very recently an excellent MA dissertation which was looking at Roman bread making, and was actually partly based on some quite experimental archaeology that the student was really interested in, and who has real expertise in bread making skills. And that student's really made a splash with that work and that research. I think that's going to be an ongoing project beyond their masters, and they've even published some of the information about that project on the BBC. So I think I'll put in the chat a link to some of her work. So hopefully that will work for everyone. So yeah, hopefully that captures a little bit of the sort of work in the school.
Absolutely. I think something that we might sort of start to unpick as we go through that session is maybe the backgrounds of students that are joining your courses, and that demographic and the range and the diversity of those students. So that's something we'll probably come back to a little bit later on. So thank you for sharing that on the chat as well. James, I'm going to hand over to you next if you had any sort of topics that you wanted to highlight.
Yeah, so again, quite similar. We have students working on their dissertations normally over the last 3 or 4 months of their degree, though we also have a master's by research. So we do have some students who actually spend about 2/3 of their year, if they're doing a 1-year programme, from sort of January onwards through to the following September, writing a longer research project. But again, a really wide, diverse range of topics. I've picked out a few here we've had in the last couple of years. RAF volunteers from the Caribbean in the Second World War. We've got students working on disaster relief in early 20th century China. We've got people working on housing policy in 1950s Nottingham, Indian travel writing in late 19th century Britain, so Indian perceptions of Britain in the late 19th century. And then one just to note as well, a prize-winning dissertation that won the Midland History Prize this year about the social life of an 18th century woman in a provincial town, looking ideas about gender and her sibling relationships and issues of grief in that dissertation as well. So lots of really interesting topics.
That's great. It seems like such a broad range of topics across that, which is again something that I think has come through in these sessions really nicely. Is that flexibility in those choices. Jenny, I was just going to come to you from the School of Education from a PGCE side of things. How is your course structured, and how do students kind of participate in their assignments and assessments throughout the year?
So we do a year-long PGCE course, which if you are successful in all elements, you would get potentially up to 90 credits towards a master's degree, as well as your qualified teacher status. So on the course itself, we have 3 assignments. One is related to learning theories in education. One is a small-scale classroom research project done within the setting that you're working in, or within a different educational setting, and that's your own sort of area of interest, really. So they're quite small scale things around supporting children and helping them to improve in particular areas within the curriculum. And then we do a reflective journal, which sort of is embedded throughout the year. So by the end, if those 3 elements are all successful, then you would come out with 90 credits. But we also offer at the School of Education Masters in Education, which we've tried to plan so it kind of dovetails from a PGCE into the Masters. So you can use your 90 credits towards that, do a small research methodology module, and then move on to your final year dissertation, which, because our students can hold on to their credits for 5 years, often by the time they come back and take up that Masters in Education, they've developed a bit more of an interest area. So they might be looking at something around special educational needs and disabilities within school, because while they've been teaching, that's part of what their how their interest has developed. Or they might be looking at literacy skills or a particular area of management within education. So ours, like you say, is slightly different because of often the motivations of people coming into the PGC course is about getting the teacher, the qualified teacher status, but actually through that they begin to develop their understanding, and then it's a little bit more kind of a longer process perhaps. As they start to develop a professional understanding in particular areas, they might then revisit that through a dissertation as part of the Masters in Education. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to do the PGCE to do the Masters in Education. We have practicing and experienced teachers from around particularly around the local area who are coming and doing their Masters as part of their professional development, and often it links with things like mentoring and coaching and the skills that you would need from that point of view, being in a professional educational environment as well. So hopefully that just gives you a little bit of an idea of some of the things that some of our students are looking at.
That's a really great overview, thank you. And I guess something that is a theme that's sort of come out of that question initially is that actually it seems that students are bringing knowledge they may previously have had into their programmes to inform what they want to study at their sort of master's level, which I think is really, really nice to see. Thanks so much for joining us, Yume. Did you want to kind of do a very brief introduction just to say hello about who you are?
Yeah, hello, my name's Yume. I'm a lecturer in media and communication. Yeah, so maybe just kind of follow up on what you guys have talked about our modules and topics for dissertation. So the kind of dissertation I'm supervised, a lot of students look at like digital media in everyday life, how people use social media for like social movement, and for advertising, marketing purposes also. And for modules, research for the researchers to include the topics in our modules. I guess one of them, it would be like the health communication one, that we included topics like misinformation, fake news, rumors under COVID. And we have modules like digital media in everyday life, so it's a bit more relevant to our students who are young. And we also have distance learning program, which is 2 years for the program. The student work on the dissertation. Yeah, so our dissertations in terms of topics, digital media, and also some students look at like how films and the kind of discourse in movies, TV shows. Yeah, so
big range of topics. That's great, thank you. So I guess what I wanted to sort of move the conversation on towards was kind of some of those graduate destinations. So perhaps once students have studied their master's programs with you, what do students maybe go on to next? If you wanted to, Jenny, we could have a bit of a chat about maybe some of those more individual topics if you wanted to. Obviously, maybe it's a bit more sort of apparent with the School of Education. So I'll go to you first, if that's okay.
Yeah, sorry, not unmuting quick enough.
No, that's okay.
Yeah, I think it's ours. I mean, I'm talking very much from a kind of PGC onto the MEd sort of trajectory, but and apologies that I'm not kind of spending a lot of time on things like the Masters in International Education, and because a colleague just reminded me that we have some of those distance learning elements as well, but it's not my area particularly. So please be aware that they are there, and like I said earlier, more than happy to pass on contact details if that was something that people were interested in. But I think the topics that are kind of covered and how that then sort of supports people in school in their careers is that I think it gives them that sort of the option of having a professional qualification against something that they're already looking at in school. And then I think from a career point of view, having that sort of depth of knowledge that you get when you study something at a master's level, and particularly around something that you've perhaps developed yourself and you've done it in alignment with whatever your school or your educational setting might have prioritised. So I think it's very much a kind of a beneficial on both sides point of view, or all sides, I suppose, because not only does it benefit the university to have a lot of those different that different research going on around education, but it also means that the schools that the students are involved in and working at gain from their expertise, not just on a kind of an overall research level, but also from actually supporting something for their improvement plan within the school. And then obviously the student doing the research gains it. And I know, from having done a master's myself about 8 years ago at Leicester, I think you learn much more than the area that you're studying. It feels like it's very much a kind of an overall learning curve of many things, not just about the particular area that you've particularly chosen to focus on. So yeah, I think the Masters in Education is very much developed around knowing the appetite and knowing the sort of particular priorities that schools are needing to understand. So we have a lot of research around things like the use of synthetic phonics, because that's obviously something which particularly primary schools are really involved in. There might be around particular resources around a subject area if that was more secondary based. A lot around things like lesson study and perhaps those sort of pedagogical areas of learning which would support a school to look at a whole range of an overall school approach to something like assessment or pedagogical awareness or something like that. So yeah, it feels like it's very intertwined, which I think in the School of Education where you're training teachers and you're working with those colleagues, it absolutely should be, because essentially we're providing a research base for students, but who can then go out and have that impact on their schools, but also the children that they're working with as well.
Absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head with that keyword impact. You really sort of, through what you've just said there, just demonstrated that impact that it will then have on your schools and that working practice of that school as well, which is really, really great. Isabel, I'm going to hand over to you for kind of more of that career question. So kind of maybe where do students who've then studied a master's course with you, where do they maybe go on to next?
Start muting myself. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the really key things about the programme, and one of its unique points, is that at the end of the programme, so the last 2 months of the programme, students do a placement module in a professional setting with an arts museum or heritage organisation. And that has proven to be really helpful in terms of supporting that transition to what they do next, because it's quite a substantial period for a placement. And so, of course, it gives them the experience, but it also kind of gives them a reference, a referee rather, that they can use in applying for subsequent jobs. And I mention that because for many of our MA students, that is where they are hoping to go. And we have graduates from recent years working in museums and art institutions, heritage institutions, nationally and internationally. And there is quite a kind of substantial proportion of people that want to go in that direction, and they might discover or already know at the start of the course what kind of area they want to go into. So there are alumni working in work related to collections, community development, education, archives, curating, and they do get the kind of opportunity to identify, I guess, what they want within the museums, arts and heritage sector during the MA. And then we also have those who sometimes already know at the end and sometimes discover through doing their research project in particular that they want to do the PhD, so they want to do further funded doctoral study. So we also have quite a good proportion of MA graduates who secure funded doctoral study afterwards. And one of the ways in which not only our school but others within the college kind of enter that realm is that we're part of a funded doctoral studies consortium called M4C. And one of the ways in which that's beneficial to our program, but not only our program, others in the college, is that it is designed as a kind of PhD plus, which means that it incorporates kind of further engagement with relevant professional sectors. So yeah, I mean, to sum up, I would say that amongst our alumni network, and we have an alumni network that people join when they graduate, there is a really strong proportion who are working in the museum, art, institutional, cultural and heritage sectors, but equally there's always a good proportion that want to kind of get the appetite for research and want to continue to PhD level.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing. Jan, I'm going to hand over to you. This is the same question as well, really. Do you feel that maybe some of those outcomes are similar to what Isabel's described, or?
Thanks, Alicia. Yes, to some extent. So if I sort of start where Isabel ended up with the sort of more academic track, let's say, absolutely, we have students who are studying the master's program and are already thinking about further doctoral study. And we have a number of examples in recent years where the students across our two programs, Archaeology and Heritage, and the Classical Mediterranean, who have gone on to secure funded PhD placements, some of those indeed at Leicester, and of course some going on to other institutions. I can think of a very good recent MA graduate securing funding at Cambridge after their Archaeology and Heritage MA. So it's also, it could be a destination leading to other kind of institutions beyond this one as well. But of course, across these two programs, there are some kind of particular features that distinguish them. I would say that for Archaeology and Heritage, we have a lot of students taking that distance learning program part-time. And they're doing it alongside an existing career, often a career in archaeology. And so we have many practicing professional archaeologists who are taking this MA to, for want of a better word, upskill or to develop aspects of their role and aspects of their practice that they can then make use of in their daily work. So I think, in that sense, it can be a way of developing their profile potentially in terms of their career path, kind of moving up beyond within their employer as an outcome of the MA. On the Classical Mediterranean side, that's much more diverse, I think, in terms of where people go on to after that program. And I think you do see people moving into teaching in different subjects such as ancient history and classics and history, but also people going into the museum and heritage sector as well. And that, I think, that is for both programs alike. And of course, law, hugely diverse, in fact, for Classical Mediterranean. It's really hard to pin down a particular career path. So yeah, I think that hopefully conveys something of the two programs and where people are headed.
Absolutely, no, that's great. And I think one of the things that's really come out from running these sessions is that often there's a misconception that, as you're becoming a specialist, as you're doing postgraduate study, you're closing doors off. And actually, I think the exact opposite is true, and you're opening lots of different doors. So whilst you are gaining that specialist knowledge and you're on that journey to perhaps more knowledge pursuit through a PhD, perhaps, you are opening those doors and kind of giving yourself a range of different opportunities. And I think another thing that you touched upon really well was that actually we are seeing an increasing number of students who are joining us who are perhaps already experts in that field, or who may be working in that practice already, coming to Leicester to then do their postgraduate study and, like you said, enhance their skill set and develop their knowledge further. That is something that I think we are seeing, and we've touched upon in other sessions as well. So it's really good to see that that's a theme across the university. So James, I'm going to hand over to you again. Similar question. Maybe again you could share some experiences that may be similar or different to what's already been described.
Yeah, there's a lot of similarities there, I think, with what's been said already. We have a number of our students go on to PhD study. They come into the program with academic ambitions, and again, there are those pathways to funded PhDs that are available to them. Very often here at Leicester, where they've got a research specialism or a research interest that aligns with expertise that we have in our department. They don't always go on immediately to a PhD. Sometimes you can take a break along the way. There's no sort of requirement to one after the other and plug away at it like that. But that's an option for some people. Beyond that, really quite broad. I suppose sort of similar to what Jan was just saying about the classical Mediterranean. There are a range of different areas that people go into. Some of them, you might think there's a connection there to history, so the museum and heritage sector, for example. Others, not so much. It's whether transferable skills that people develop on their MAs are really opening those many different doors to them. There's that ability to write, hopefully, to a higher level, to carry out research, to manage a substantial independent research project. Which is valued by a range of employers, NGOs, research-focused positions. We have a number of people studying part-time as well, often teachers, sometimes looking to develop more expertise in their area, sometimes doing it more out of interest in the subject matter as well, pursuing a subject they've long wanted to know more about. So yeah, it's really quite broad in that respect.
That's great, thank you. And I think something that we'll probably draw upon in our next sort of topic will be to do with kind of those differences perhaps between undergraduate level, postgraduate level, and actually for those of you with distance learning courses, we can talk about how that sort of fits in differently as well. So we will touch upon that very shortly. I just wanted to kind of go over to it, May, just to mention, are there any sort of typical or perhaps unusual career destinations that people go on once completing your course?
Yeah, so we have about 7-8 different MA programs. So based on my knowledge of students who graduated from the MA in the past 7 years, I would say some students work in TV stations, movie companies, newspaper, NGOs. So those are quite associated with media communication. And I'm also the program director for advertising. So students from advertising, MA advertising, they would probably work in advertising companies or internet companies with the role of like digital marketing. And then we also have a program called MA in digital media. So I know students who have had the trainings on like research methods and using SPSS, conducting online survey. All our MA program teach research methods, which are like commonly used social research methods like interviews, focus groups, survey. So these are very valuable research skills that students might work either in public sector or private company that with the research skills that they can use for like focus group, interviews, survey. They could use these research skills in various jobs. And with the PhD, also a lot of our students apply for PhD. I would say if you're interested in apply for a PhD, it's a good idea to do the MA in the same university because you can get tuition discount. Also, you get to know all the lecturers that you could develop your PhD project ideas a little bit earlier during your MA.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you again. So I think just highlighting that range of different outcomes and really the impression I'm getting is very much that you can sort of shape those directions that you'd like to sort of take your career in, and whether that is a more research focused route, absolutely. But equally, if you wanted to kind of get out into an industry or with a range of different sort of companies, that option is there. So I just wanted to kind of again come back to those differences between undergraduate study, postgraduate study, and actually some of those differences again with distance learning programs and how that might look for certain students in terms of support, timetabling, those sorts of things. So did anyone want to kind of take the lead on that sort of topic initially? I can see Jan, you're smiling, so I'm gonna hand over to you. That's it.
Well, I mean, we have, thank you. In archaeology, we've been running 2 online MAs for quite a long time. So, you know, they've been running very successfully for decades, in fact. And yeah, I mean, there obviously are some key differences when the students are studying those programs at a distance. Clearly, there isn't the same setup with lectures and tutorials. Rather, what we provide are a series of very kind of really high level produced workbooks by members of staff in the school. Those are kind of team collaborations, so they bring in the expertise of various members of staff in particular topics and themes over the course of a module. So you, in that sense, you still hear from a lot of different members of staff and their research expertise. And then, of course, in addition, particularly in light of COVID, we've increasingly made use of other kinds of resources, recorded lectures, other kinds of audio files as well, that we attach to weekly readings, to kind of the kind of weekly structure of learning that we kind of make very clear to our distance learning students how that works. So yeah, there's a lot of support, and of course, in addition to that, there is a course tutor for whatever particular module you will be taking, and that's your main point of contact. The course tutor will be in regular touch with you. Often they kind of have informal virtual sessions where you can come along and kind of troubleshoot or explore particular aspects of the module. So there's kind of different layers of support there to facilitate your understanding of any particular topic. And assessments range hugely, from projects to commentaries on particular pieces of text or material culture, to posters, to presentations. So it's hugely varied. So yeah, maybe that gives something of the impression of what we're doing, Alicia. Yeah.
No, it absolutely does. It definitely does. And I was going to bring Isabel in. I know, you know, you have your distance learning programs. Did you want to kind of maybe add anything to that, or maybe talk through some of the differences if there are any?
Sure. I mean, I think it's similar to what to how the online programs are operate in archaeology, in that in terms of structure. I think the key difference and the key consideration for those that are sort of deciding whether they want to do the online or distance learning, or flexible learning as we call it, version of the museum studies program or on campus is more to do with their own kind of circumstances. I mean, the advantage of doing it by distance learning is that you can do it part-time, so you can spread it out for longer, and that works particularly well for those who are maintaining a substantial professional commitment at the same time as the MA. I mean, the campus-based programs are structured so that people need to work a little part-time, which is something that students often need to do. It's possible, but if that commitment is more substantial, then doing it by distance learning can just suit people better. Not only work, but other kind of life commitments they might have. And similarly, I mean, these days a lot of the content is digital rather than being printed, which allows us to kind of use and embed different forms of media. And similarly, you have dedicated tutors. Something that we also do within museum studies is have a kind of summer school, which is coming up quite soon, actually, in the next couple of weeks. And that isn't credit bearing, to use kind of module speak, so it's not something you're tested on, but it's primarily really an opportunity to familiarize yourself with the school as a physical location, with all of the staff as in-person human beings, and each other. And so there are various kind of sessions, speed tutoring, lectures, workshops, skills development stuff that happen during that week. But it's also so that there is an opportunity for everyone to kind of come together. So that's the key difference, really, in terms of the decision you might make. It often depends on commitments and kind of what you're balancing at the same time as studying. And the module structure is very similar to that of the campus-based.
Perfect. Thank you. That's great. Thank you so much for sort of talking about that, because I know we do get a lot of inquiries about that distance learning option and what does that actually look like from a day-to-day point of view. So it's been really useful, hopefully, for our viewers. And something I kind of then wanted to develop the conversation onto a bit more was, again, those differences, those really key differences between an undergraduate study and postgraduate study. I'm often asked by students, but what will my day look like? How does it differ? And so maybe, I don't know if James, you wanted to comment on some of those differences that you notice perhaps in students from one level to the next, and that how those relationships might change and how your learning might change.
Yeah, of course. So I think the main difference that you see from undergraduate level is that the MA is much more student-led in terms of the way the classes take place. Students are much more, I suppose, in control of their own learning. They can follow the subject matter they want to study to a far greater extent than at undergraduate level. And the seminars and the classes are much more built around student participation and student discussion than at undergraduate level as well. So the tutors, I suppose, are facilitating the discussion more so than leading it, which begins to happen at undergraduate level as well, but it's even more so the case once you get to the MA, I think. We're asking also about the sort of the organisation of a student's sort of day and week. I suppose with an MA in our field, there's a lot of independent study involved. So students will spend a lot of their time researching and reading and preparing assignments independently. But we have a lot of support as well for them, not only in the classes, but through regular meetings with personal tutors who can provide sort of guidance not only on academic matters, but beyond that as well, looking at the students' sort of broader experience at the university. And then we have a lot of support that the students, I suppose, develop themselves. So student-led societies, for example, and events that the students put on for each other. We have an organisation which is used to be called the New History Lab. It's now got a new name, which is Hyper Lab, because it incorporates some of our politics students as well. But it's a series of things like seminars, but also walking tours of the cities and social events, pub crawls and different things, quizzes that students put on. It's an opportunity for MA students to meet with PhD students as well, and creating a sort of a larger postgraduate community that they're part of.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Again, you're really styling into my next sort of questions, which is really fantastic.
Sorry.
So it's really good. I think the next thing I wanted to explore, and maybe Jenny and Amay wanted to come in on this, we're kind of talking maybe more about those perhaps external networks, or perhaps conferences or opportunities for students to present and showcase some of the work that they're doing, or even just skills development. I don't know if Jenny, you wanted to kind of talk about any things that take place within the School of Education that help students to develop that skill set.
I think we try and incorporate it into the teaching of how of their developing skills as teachers, I suppose. And we do things like micro teachers, where students can come and work together in small groups and sort of evaluate each other, do sort of peer observation and that kind of thing. We have also in the past incorporated some of our assignments into a bit more of a presentation. So they've done research posters around a particular educational theorist, which are then sort of put up and they're given an opportunity to talk that through. We have started to run an annual mentoring conference with some of our partners. So we are university-led teacher training provision, but we work with some of our SCIT partners who are school-centred initial teacher training. But we're all sort of part of the same entity, if you like. So we now do an annual mentoring conference, which is it's not necessarily designed for students, but it's certainly designed for potential teachers who are mentors, and they may also be part of our student body as on the MEd or any other elements of that as well. And we invite a keynote speaker who's has a lot of expertise in mentoring, and we do panel discussions around the different elements of mentoring and coaching which might be going on in school. So again, it's a real opportunity for them to have some input into what the sort of principles of mentoring and the research behind that, but also how that practically can look in a school and why a school might choose to adopt a particular way of working around mentoring and coaching. And then that feeds into some of the modules that are on offer on the MEd as well. So again, we like a kind of a collaborative cycle of things in the School of Education to sort of make sure that all partners are involved at every level, because we're very aware that those mentors who we're inviting to that conference to either contribute or to sit and learn from, they're also the mentors that we're working within schools, and we couldn't run our course without them. So it's trying to kind of make sure that everything we do is sort of beneficial on every level, not just for us, but for sounds a bit cheesy, but to give something back to the mentoring community that we're involved with in schools as well. We have had some students who've had their it's not necessarily a dissertation because it's part of their assignment that they write for their credits on the PGCE course, but we've had some of those published because they've just been of such high quality and very much again in line with what school priorities might be, not necessarily just locally but nationally as well. So there's often journal articles that students have written as part of their PGCE assignment writing, but then has sort of grown legs a little bit and gone into sort of a slightly wider national forum to support them and support colleagues as well. So yeah, I think with PGCs particularly, it's much more about grasping every opportunity that comes along. There's not necessarily a network sitting there of that ability to be able to sort of project and say, look, this is what we've been doing. But as soon as somebody comes along and shows an interest, we sort of grab them and say, yes, let's try and get this message out.
No, that's really great. And I think, again, that attests to what I think postgraduate study is about. In my mind, it's one of those, it's what you make of it. You kind of come into that course, and if you really throw your heart and soul into that and you put your interests align there and you really kind of grab the bull by the horns per se, then you can extend that quite far. And it's nice to see that in this session and in other sessions, many colleagues have said that's something that's really rewarding for them, is when they have students come to us and say, we've got this great work, we've got this passion, and how the university uses that to sort of develop them further. So it's really good to hear.
It's I think that from our point of view with using the credits from particular courses which might not necessarily be their sole focus at that point, I think it's an acknowledgement of understanding that yes, there is still that provision there for you to come back and continue your study later, but actually what you will bring to the study a bit later on is an area of expertise or a development as well. So we're not trying to push students into you've done this now, just sort of leapfrog into your masters. Actually go and have some experience and then come back with a much more sort of concrete idea of what you want to investigate. So I think the university's really sort of been able to acknowledge that and give time and space to people, so that actually when they come back it is more meaningful, not just for them but also potentially for the context that they're working in.
Absolutely, that's so great. Thank you so much for sharing that. I wanted to bring Emma in the conversation as well. Emma, in media and communications, do you have any sort of opportunities for conferences, perhaps symposiums, networking, those sorts of avenues?
For external network, so some of our modules have guest speakers from the industry, for example, like advertising. For some of the advertising module that we have speakers from advertising industry to talk about experience, and also for like journalists to talk about experience. Seminars, we have a lot of seminars that is open for our master students. And some modules have field work. For example, the MA, one of the modules for the MA program, like cultural industry, they organize field work to visit one of the local cultural industry in Leicester. And some modules have internships. For example, one of mine, we have students managing our school social media Twitter accounts. And another module about health communication, they have a field trip to visit a charity in Manchester. Also, our dissertation is mostly empirical studies. So this means students will interview human beings, individuals. So it depends on the topics. They might interview, I don't know, company director or bloggers, influencers. So there are various opportunities for students to develop external networks. Conferences, usually PhD students, and our PhD students organize their own conference, and master students can also participate. Thanks.
That's really great. Thank you so much for sharing. And I think it's for your field especially, it's great to see those links with industry as well. I think that's really, really key, and something that I'm often asked about from prospective students. You know, what are those links like? Do we have exposure to those individuals? So it's really good to hear that you have like an external networking sort of relationship with people, and taking place in the form of seminars is fantastic as well. I don't know if Isabel or Jan or James, did any of you wanted to come in on any specific activities that you get involved with? Isabel?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of kind of how the students develop networks and contacts with relevant sectors during the MA, there are various ways in which that happens. So every module taught on campus includes a field trip, for example, and typically when we take people to a museum or gallery or cultural institution, they will have an opportunity to meet people who work there. And likewise, we know we have regular visiting speakers who are involved in various activities and sectors relating to museum and art, museum and gallery studies. Again, I mean, one of the events that really helps to kind of bring the networks we cultivate through research and also teaching activities is that we have an annual kind of marketplace event prior to the placements, where people representing different organizations will fill our hall, come into the school, and students can make an appointment to talk to them. So that's also kind of super helpful in terms of gaining confidence if they don't have experience of speaking to people who are kind of running museums or organizations. And likewise, because we have a dedicated building, so you're in the same space as our PhD community, and we're actually only postgraduate as a school. So when there are seminars or talks or research events, then MA students can also join in. And I think also some of that work is embedded in terms of how we teach. So in the module I lead, for example, I support students in researching and developing interviews that they will give with artists on a kind of studio visit basis and write up afterwards. So they kind of have to lead on that process of doing a research interview, which is really, really helpful in terms of gaining that experience if they haven't done it already, or getting better at it if they have. And yeah, we also, within the Art Museum and Gallery Studies program, have established collaboration with the Arts Council collection, which means that they get to select works and install an exhibition and benefit from contact with the specialist curators who work with that collection, so they can kind of see how in reality things work with sometimes wanting to select a work and having to accept it doesn't meet the conditions in which it'll be exhibited, sometimes being successful, so kind of highs and lows, and observing all those processes of condition checking and how objects are handled. So there's a way in which the kind of professional contact and the networks that the school has developed, which I think is one of the distinct things about it, will kind of appear in different ways and will be kind of embedded in how we teach.
That's great. Thank you. Honestly, that's really good to hear such an extensive range as well. And I think actually looking at some of the questions that have come through, I think maybe some of those things you've touched on, you might say are distinct from perhaps other university courses. It could be something that's very, specific as those collaborations and networks that Leicester's got specifically. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah,
that.
I think so. I mean, the thing that we often say is that it was the first museum studies program in 1966, and it is the only postgraduate only dedicated school for museum studies. So I think that has over the decades given it a certain profile within the museum sector, and also like the distinct types of research for which the school and practice for which the school is known are some of the things I would throw out there.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. Jan and James, I wanted to give you guys an opportunity if you wanted to talk about maybe any other sort of, like I said, external networking opportunities, field trips, conferences, those sorts of things. Did either of you want to come in on that?
James, do you want to go first?
Sure, I'll try and be brief because I realise we're coming towards the end of the hour. So there's a couple of things to note, I suppose. One is that we have an urban conservation degree, which is a more sort of explicitly practice-based programme than our MA history degrees, and that has links with Leicester City Council and a variety of planning professionals, policymakers, and is recognised by the Institute of Historic Building Conservation. So that's where there's a lot of, I suppose, industry connections, more so than perhaps on the history programmes. It's also an opportunity, though, to mention our research centres that we have in the school. We have 3 history research centres: the Centre for Regional Local History, Centre of Urban History, and the Centre of Holocaust and Genocide Studies, the Stanley Burton Centre for Holocaust and Genocide Studies, and they all have extensive programmes of events going on throughout the year. I'll send details of one this morning, which I may as well mention as it's fresh in my mind. A symposium on Jewish dress, migration and persecution in modern European history, which is being run with the National Archives, and includes an opportunity for students to work with a variety of different primary sources and learn about those with staff from the National Archives as well. So there's always lots of those sorts of events going on.
That's really good to hear about. Yes, thank you for that. And Jan, I'll hand over to you before we kind of come on to our sort of final stretch of the session.
Okay, thank you. I'll be quick, and just to note, I suppose that in our department, we're in the very privileged position to have an archaeological services unit within the school who have very close collaborations indeed with the academic department, and so there are fieldwork opportunities which are embedded actually in our undergraduate program that kind of tie us together with the archaeological services unit, but that can really extend even with our master's students. So although there's not the same kind of formal mechanism of a dig, let's say, there are lots of voluntary opportunities which are typically advertised at the start of an academic year that all students in the school studying at a distance or on campus at any level of study can get involved in, and those can take students to lots of different projects that are ongoing. So recently there's been a lot of interesting work carried out at the site of Chester House, a kind of a Roman villa site that's kind of part of one strand of Heritage Hub, which has been a kind of ongoing project recently developing in the university. So I think anybody who wants to get involved in that sort of those kind of opportunities in the school, it's very easy to do so, and things can kind of develop from them as well, new relationships and opportunities, I would say. So yeah, that's all from me.
That's brilliant. Thank you. So I've had a quick look through some of the questions, and I believe that pretty much everything that people have asked on there, we sort of touched upon in some format. So we have had a bit of information from Isabel about the summer school. So thank you for sharing that, Isabel. And also thank you, Jan, as well for replying to Helen in the chat as well about distance learning options for start dates. So I think what we're going to do is sort of draw the session towards a close. So I have one kind of final sort of question for you, which is more just can you sum up postgraduate study at the University of Leicester in 1 or 2 words? So we're going to keep it quite brief, but I'll give you a moment to think about it so you can write it down. Whilst you're thinking about it, I'm just going to share some information on my screen just for our attendees to kind of have an opportunity to find out more information from us. So if I just share this slide, it's just one slide from me to effectively say what's next. And actually, these PG spotlights have been taking place throughout the duration of this week. We do have one final session tomorrow at 1 o'clock. And so from there, you'll be able to find out more about other subjects as well. Our session tomorrow is on heritage and culture, the arts version. So we'll have representatives from English, film and modern languages in attendance. So please do feel free to join that session if you're interested in finding out more about those subjects. If you have missed any sessions from the rest of the week, or you would really like to watch this one again, the recordings will be out soon on YouTube, so you can catch up on any of those that you've missed or would like to revisit. It's worth saying that applications for our PGT courses are open, especially if you are looking towards September, October 2023 entry. We would really recommend that you apply sooner rather than later. You'll be able to find information about those key deadlines on each course page on our website. So on our website as well, you'll also find entry requirements, funding and scholarship options, and also ways to contact us as well. If any of our members of the panel on the call today would like to drop any contact details into the chat, please feel free to do so. But you can find ways to get in touch with the university on our website as well. So if you scan the QR code on the right-hand side of the screen, that will take you to our main postgraduate page, and you can find out details there. There'll also be the search for a course function. So any of the courses that have been mentioned today and in other sessions, you'll be able to find them through this function on our website. And there's also a chat to our students and staff button as well. You can send a message to one of our friendly ambassadors. So these are current students at the University of Leicester. They often produce student blogs as well on things like accommodation and what life in Leicester is like. So I'm going to come back to our panel. Hopefully that's given you enough sort of thinking time for your sort of 1 or 2 words that sum up postgraduate study in Leicester. Is there anyone who'd like to sort of take the stage first for this one? Don't know, jump at once. Jan, you're smiling again, so I'm going to have to hand it over to you first.
Well, that's just, I can't help it. I'm just a naturally smiley person. I didn't really want to go first, so I find this very challenging, actually. But I'll say transformational. Transformational.
That's a great word. Thank you for that. James, they're going to jump to you next.
Okay, well, Jan's trumped us all there by doing it in 1 word rather than 2. I don't know, something like inspiring research or new opportunities.
Oh, that's great. That's lovely. New opportunities, fantastic. Thank you for that. Imei, I'm going to jump to you next.
I would say very multicultural because we have a lot of international students.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, definitely. And within our student blogs, you'll be able to find out a bit more information about kind of what Leicester's like as a city and also us as a campus too. So, Jenny, I'm going to jump to you.
I would say it is supportive of your career development.
That's brilliant. Thank you. And Isabel, last but not least.
I want to steal transformational because I think it's good.
That's really good. It is a really good. I'll let you
because
steal.
I think it's true. I think there's something about an MA year that is transformational. So that's why. It's not just because I struggled to come up with words. But also I was going to say that confidence building, I think, is also really key to the MA year because you kind of get to know yourself. And so it's transformational, but also you come out with a lot greater, stronger sense of who you are. I didn't stick to 1 or 2 words.
That's okay, not a problem, Isabel. And also I like that, you know, we piggybacked on Jan's one. It was a great first word, so thank you so much. The last thing for me to do is just to thank everybody on the call today. So Jenny, Jan, James, Isabel, Imei, thank you so much for joining me with this panel discussion. I've really enjoyed it, and thank you so much to everybody who's attended today's session. I feel like we've had some really good constructive discussions and some chats about what postgraduate study is like at Leicester. So thank you so much. Please do keep in touch with us via your admissions team, academics on our website, and also, you know, chatting to us throughout that application process. Thank you very much and have a lovely rest of your day.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Goodbye.
Thanks.
Thanks
Bye.
very much. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.